Dotun Akintoye dropped a banger, which had a lot of people in this area talking, and obviously Joel Embiid is a hot topic of conversation, and everybody in the Delaware Valley has been reading his article over at ESPN.com. Joel Embiid, he sees you. We're going to dive into it right now as Dotun Akintoye, ESPN.com staff writer, who wrote a awesome long-form piece on Joel Embiid, the man of mystery in these parts. Dotun, we appreciate you jumping on board and giving us more insight on the man that you got to sit down with and really get a lot deeper understanding of. How are you, man?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you stopping on. Great piece. Now, by the way, let's start with that. You don't see long-form journalism that much anymore, especially in the sports world. And this really took us from his upbringing all the way to where we are almost now. I want to start with this, though. As you sat down with Joel and, over the years tried to, warm up to him and get him to sit down with you, you sit down with him and over time talk to him. What were you hoping to find out or better understand about Joel when you wrote this piece?
Yeah, I think my motivation for starting the piece was, I just felt like we were having, in general, maybe like the stupidest version of the conversation we could be having about Joel. And it just seemed like there was more there. There was more to say, and that there was more to him than the kind of caricature that had become his persona, for good or ill. Whether you were a huge fan of his or a huge critic, it just seemed like there was more going on with him. Like, his intelligence is like discernible from far away. His sense of humor is discernible from far away, and I just thought that there was something here to talk about. This was a person who, if you could get him to talk, really fascinating things would happen.
So he starts to talk. He starts to warm up with you. Did it take a while for you to kind of get him to the point where he felt comfortable kind of divulging about his past? Because I think a lot of this story, as I read it, there are two sides to this, Dotun. To me, you're going to have people who read this about Joel and kind of read it and say, this explains a lot about the career of Joel Embiid as we see it here. You're going to have the other side of people saying, Joel's making excuses again. This is the way Joel has been. I think it just depends on the type of person that is reading that story, whether you have somebody who has empathy and wants to read into why Joel has maybe not been the player that we all hoped for, or maybe he has been the player that he hopes, or you have the other side who said he has not, he has failed to live up to what he hoped for. But did it take a while to kind of crack into that?
Yes, for sure. I mean, he's not, I think one of the things that the piece demonstrates is that he's not a very trusting person. So yeah, it took some time. It took some patience. It took a lot of showing up, and I'm sure being slightly annoying, or maybe even more than slightly. And then I don't know what changed really. I would be making something up, I think, if I told you I fully understood why he decided to talk. I mean, some of it I'm sure has to be with our background. I was born in Nigeria. He's from Cameroon. He was born in Cameroon. So I think maybe there's a sort of slight affinity there, or he thought maybe someone from his part of the world, someone who was born somewhere else, someone who's also an immigrant, maybe had a kind of basic grounding that would make his experience more intelligible to me. So maybe that was part of it. But I don't think I'll ever really know why it is he decided to talk.
How much of his culture and his background that you can relate to is part of the reason why there could be a disconnect between him and fans of the Philadelphia 76ers, who are notoriously some of the most, passionate fans. And I often have said before I read your article or talked to you or have the opportunity to get some insight is here's a guy who grew up in Cameroon and is looking at these fans thinking, why do these people care so much? Like, this is almost like a culture divide that I think that the fans can't understand how he views them, and he might look at the fans and say, I don't understand why you get so passionately angry at me. Is that something that is a possibility here, the disconnect between his upbringing and the way the fans view him?
No, actually, I don't think that's the case. I mean, for one, I think he's actually quite beloved. Is one of the things I think this working on this piece has taught me, and then also I think maybe seeing the reaction to it. I think there's a great deal of affection for him actually among Philly fans, and a great yearning to be close to him, to understand him better. My sense is that he brings that out of people. So I actually don't think I don't think there's a huge disconnect. I think there's a yearning for connection actually.
From him, he yearns to connect better?
Well, see, now that's an interesting question. That's complicated, I think. He's deeply sensitive. He is like startlingly intelligent, and I don't say that in the stupid way people talk about athletes. I mean, like, he's surprising when he starts talking. He's like a wonderful noticer of things and noticer of people, and very attuned. Partly because I think he doesn't trust a lot. Very attuned to what he sees are what he thinks of as people's motivations. He's wary about connection, I think, but I think also in great need of it. You know, I think that's how it goes.
Dotun Akintoye is with us, ESPN.com staff writer, wrote the long-form piece on Joel Embiid. His upbringing, his parents, you mentioned them in there, and then his, high school years where he lives with a family and he doesn't have a lot of connection with them or the team. How much does that part of his life translate to the player he's become and what he is right now with the Philadelphia 76ers, where he has had this unbelievably unfortunate run of injuries that he does discuss in the piece that we'll get to, but how much going all the way back to his family and his upbringing do you think kind of seeps into his NBA career?
Wow. I think, the structure of the piece basically is about 4 years, in essence. It's about the last year, about 2024. And then it's about his last year in high school in the U.S., which has been his second year in the U.S., and then his first 2 years in Philly. Those are the sort of basic tent poles of the piece. And, the wounds, emotional, psychological, physical, of those years, I think all kind of arrived together in what's happened in the last year. Like, there's stuff with his body, there's stuff with his relationship with the Sixers. There's, his general, inability to trust. One of his former coaches in high school said something to me that I, was like a very important piece very important statement that led me in some ways through the story. He said that, Joel would have been fine on a deserted island alone. And Joel told me that story about what happened to him when he took a trip to France with his parents when he was a kid. I didn't ask him about that story. I had no idea that such a thing had ever happened to him. He brought it up. I think there's always been something lonely in him. And I don't think he can really account for it or can tell you where it comes from or what it is, but it's there. And I think that's one of the things he's been learning about himself in the last year.
Yeah. He talks a lot about trust. This goes back to his family and high school through college. He gets to the league. Did you get any sense that he had a connection with Sam Hinkie and then them kind of breaking that and then the Brian Colangelo to the burner gate caused a lot of friction at the start of his career, and how much those first 2 years and then all of that turnover early also manifests to the player and the guy he is now?
Yeah, I think all of that is true. I don't know if I can say he and Sam were close because I didn't get a chance to talk to Sam. A bunch of people I spoke to in the story were like, "You should talk to Sam," and I tried several times to reach out to Sam, and someone else told me what's great about Sam is that Sam is not going to talk to you for the story. So
did Joel tell you the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, Joel was like, he's like, you should talk to Sam, but, well aware that Sam was not going to talk.
Does Joel still talk to Sam?
Yeah, they still communicate. I
Cool.
think Sam means a great deal to him, actually. And so, there's famously the post he. It's always hard to tell how much of what Joel does is funny and then how much of it is like kind of heartbreaking to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a connection there, and I think, losing Sam from that organization, and especially what Sam was replaced with, I think is what's most important. Business is business, and Joel was not at that point in his career, I think, maybe important enough to think of it as a sort of personal slight. But to lose Sam and have Sam replaced with the Colangelos and all of that stuff, I think that was a really damaging experience.
The part of the article as we get closer, the James Harden stuff, he talks about how, people don't know this, they don't talk. Do you get the sense that Joel is not close with a lot of teammates and former teammates, and that he's kind of disappointed by the fact that this relationship has deteriorated over something that he really didn't have much to do with in his mind?
Yeah, I think, in a story this long, you have to make choices about what you think is important and, what can stay because you don't want to lose people. But James and Joel were like extremely close when James was here. Like a member of Joel's security team at his home was passed down from James. So those two were really, really, really tight. And I think Joel is like remains. He doesn't like to say he'll say something like it's sad. And then he'll change his mind 30 seconds later and say it's disappointing, because I think he's always, afraid of having said too much or given too much of himself. But I think he's really wounded by the loss of that friendship and thinks, is sort of trapped by a kind of principle he has about not getting involved in personnel decisions. But yeah, I think it hurts him.
We're talking with Dotun Akintoye, who was the author of the great long-form piece over at ESPN.com on Joel Embiid. And, one of the things that happened last year, he got into the altercation with one of the writers. Then there was a team meeting. Stuff leaked. It seems that he's possibly not over that, number one. And number two, he seemingly believes that he knows who that person was, and then seem to indicate that that person is still here. How did you kind of see that whole situation, and will that be something that he has passed, or will that be something he kind of holds on to and that it forms a divide or a problem in this season?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be the person I met, I think, is not going to forgive a betrayal like that quickly, is what I'd say. You hesitate, or at least I feel hesitant to project forward in some ways. I think, one of the things Joel and I talked about was therapy. And I think he's learning a lot about himself and trying to change certain things. But that feeling in him, that fear of betrayal, and that leak is like it's a minor sort of trespass in a way. But I think for Joel, it like really strikes at some stuff that's really core to his personality. And yeah, I have I pressed him, beyond what showed up in the piece about that, but he just wasn't going to reveal a name. But
he believes that guy is still here, right?
Well, that's the thing. He wouldn't really tell me that either. He refused to confirm that person was still around.
Because I'll tell you this, Dotun, I don't know if you see that, there are people trying to put the pieces together, which, there's a player on the current roster who's now trying to stick up for himself, like, hey, it wasn't me, because the way he answered your question was, well, free agency just started, so I don't know if the guy's here or not. It sounds like someone who had an opt-in or opt-out clause. That's the way it made it sound, right?
Listen, that is beyond my ken, I believe. But
psychoanalyzing his thought process there of, maybe will he opts in, maybe he's here. If he opts out, maybe he won't be here. So that put like a couple guys on they were catching some strays today, some of the opt-in players.
Yeah, well, Joel can be coy that way.
Yes.
That's part of his that's one of the ways he hides himself is subtle little. I don't even know what the best way to describe it is. He likes to stay in control of that kind of thing, is what I'd say.
Yes. So obviously, Joel is now entering, his 30s, and he is getting to a point where people have now believed that, hey, he can't stay healthy. Do you look at him or do you talk to him now and feel, because he has said, hey, I'm not going to rush myself back. That was the basis of the conversation that started all this stuff, was that he feels he has rushed himself back, which has hurt him, but he did it for his teammates, and people call him out saying that, quote, he might be soft. You gave him, which I thought was very good job by you, giving him, hey, well, this is what people think about you. Do you feel that he has the personality that he is out to prove people wrong, or is that not something that is in his mindset?
Well, I think his whole career, in a way, has been proving people wrong. Certainly people at the beginning of his career who thought he was going to be a bust or would never get healthy. So I think like most great athletes, he nurses his grievances in that way. It's fine to, it's useful to have an enemy when you need to, put up 1,000 jump shots a day. It's useful to have someone on the other end of that. But I don't know. I think it's really hard to tell. The place he's in is a place of real uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And I think at this point he knows he's pretty assured about his own greatness. And for him, I think he wants a championship, not to demonstrate anything to anybody. I think it's to demonstrate it to himself. I think he knows who he is and how great he is and what he has in him to be. And I don't think he's lacking confidence about that anymore. And it took years as the process for him to get there. I think it took a lot of support for him to overcome his doubts. So I don't think he has those anymore. And the question is, has that clicked in for him at a point where it's too late for him physically to execute?
So does he think physically he is on the clock as well? Does he obviously we haven't seen him. We don't know where he is. The team doesn't seem to have much information. I don't know when you got a chance to sit down with him, but at that time, did he also have doubt whether he is physically going to be able to be the player that he was?
Well, he refused to entertain it, as Daryl Morey refused to entertain it.
What is the time frame, if you don't mind asking, on when these conversations were had? Were they recent?
Yeah, well, so the first one we had was in early April, I think, or near the end of March. It was right before his surgery.
Okay.
And then we met again a couple of weeks after his surgery. And then we had a phone conversation about, I don't even know, a couple of weeks ago, maybe less than that.
And the Morey camp?
The Morey conversation happened in April.
Oh, okay.
Right before the end. Yeah. So
your sense of the organization, frustrated, up in arms, confident, like Morey says, look, he's the kind of player you double down, maybe even triple down on. He is worth being fired for. So do you get a sense that, look, they really didn't have another answer here? Like, how do you feel the organization views their relationship and where they are with Joel at the time you spoke to them?
I think Daryl and Nick are, I think, trying to, be understanding. I mean, it's a tense relationship for sure. But, for example, Joel told me, and Coach Nurse confirmed, Coach Nurse will be over at his house and play the piano. He's one of the only two people who plays the piano in Joel's home. The other person is Joel's sister. So, like most things with Joel, it's never one thing. That relationship is complicated and it's tense, but that's not all that it is. And I think from the organizational standpoint, from the sort of Morey perspective, they ran through a battery of tests last summer, and they made the decision they made to extend him. And even before that, they made the Paul George decision, which is really a Joel Embiid decision, ultimately. I mean, you don't pay that kind of money to Paul George at his age because of Paul George. You pay it because you think that is your 2.5 slash third option in the postseason to help close out games because you have one of the three best players in the world.
Right.
So they bet quite a lot of money on Joel last summer, and given the health issues of those two players, there's nothing to get creative about. They are untradeable assets. So either they fulfill the potential that you thought they had when you bring them together, or you crash and burn. But there's no way to maneuver yourself out of it. I don't see. Now, Joel is great enough that maybe there's someone somewhere who would take that on, but it seems highly unlikely to me that if Joel's great enough to be traded, then Joel's not going to be traded.
Dotun Akintoye is with us, spending a couple more minutes with him. Again, I want to certainly direct everybody to ESPN.com to read that long-form piece, which many people have texted in today that they really enjoyed it, Dotun. So, number one, really good piece. It was a very insightful piece on a lot. What was your take then when Morey doesn't finish the sentence? He laughs, the staffer laughs. And what was that whole moment kind of like, and what were you hoping to hear from that? Did you ever get any sort of closure on that moment?
No closure. That was the interview, and I walked to the parking lot and sat in my car and wrote it all down. That was a really, what I hope to convey with that scene is that the outcome I described, one where Joel is never really fully healthy again and is not the elite level player he has been, and he becomes, a kind of financial albatross around the organization's neck, is a thing, like, as an outcome so bad, Daryl Morey can't stand to think about it or talk about it,
Yeah.
So that's what I hope to convey with that scene is like having to think about that or talk to a reporter about it is like a moment of pure, like, physical panic.
Talking to Joel, do you get the sense that he believes he will be ready to play at the start of this season? I
don't know. I think one of the things he's finished talking that way. That seemed pretty clear to me.
In terms of timetables, you mean?
Yeah, he's not going to talk about timetables. He's not going to generate that kind of expectation, that kind of demand from people, because I think he struggles with that. He has a real need to please and a real fear of disappointing people.
Yeah.
And one of the ways he's trying to take control is like, I'm just going to do what the doctors are telling me to do. I'm going to go step by step in the rehab. And when I'm ready to come back, I'm going to come back. But I'm not going to say November, for example, and then it's November and people are like, where's Joel? Where's Joel? And now there's the cries for Joel has to come play in now because he is who he is. He comes back maybe earlier than he ought to. So that's how he sees it. I don't think we're going to get any kind of dates from him until he's feeling much better than he's feeling now.
Well, obviously, a lot of people talking about this piece. He is a very, misunderstood. Would you say that he is a misunderstood guy?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's a very complicated person, and that breeds misunderstanding. So, yeah.
Dotun Akintoye, great job. Appreciate you jumping on the show. We'll keep an eye on what happens with Joel, obviously, but we got a lot of insight on the man, Joel Embiid, from you, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Everybody check that out over on ESPN.com. Dotun Akintoye had unprecedented access to Joel Embiid.